We've been following and we're aware of youth unemployment and what's been happening both in Alberta, across the country.
Well, you have to understand just how damaged Alberta is by the fact that we didn't get pipelines built. If we had built Northern Gateway, if we'd built Keystone and we'd built Energy East, we'd have 2.5 million barrels more per day.
Alberta is at the boiling point of an economic political showdown with Ottawa. As the US and Canada clash over trade, cross-border pipeline projects are left in limbo, and Washington tightens tariffs on Canadian goods. Alberta, the nation's energy heartland, takes a double hit. Its export markets shrink, while at home, youth unemployment soars. Ottawa's response? Cold and slow. For Albertans, this isn't just a recession, it's a warning sign that the Federation has turned its back on them.
Now at the highest level since 2010, youth unemployment in Canada sits at 14.6%, and in Alberta, it's much higher.
When Washington slapped record-high tariffs on imports, Ottawa responded with half-measure negotiations, but Alberta, dependent on exporting oil, gas, and energy products to the US, lost billions within months. At the same time, new pipeline projects that could open other markets were shelved by Ottawa in the name of environmental policy, trapping Alberta with outdated infrastructure. Youth unemployment in Alberta has surged past 20%, nearly double the national average. With jobs gone, incomes lost, and confidence shattered, Albertans are asking, does Ottawa still represent our interests? Alberta has pushed for fast-tracking pipelines to the US and Asia to avoid dependence on a single market, but the federal government has prioritized climate commitments and tightened project approvals. While eastern provinces benefit from federal spending, Alberta not only contributes more to the national budget, but also faces restrictions on its main export industry. For Albertans, this is blatant inequity, and it's fueling today's anger.
We can solve a lot of those issues in ways that are good for the people of Alberta, good for the people of Canada, and that's what we're looking to do with them.
Provincial leaders have started talking about an economic autonomy model, creating their own energy board to approve projects without Ottawa's consent, pursuing direct trade deals with US states, bypassing federal intermediaries, considering withdrawal from certain federal programs if they don't serve provincial interests. This is not an outright declaration of independence, but it's a clear signal. Alberta is prepared to operate as an independent economy within Canada. The federal government continues to label this a temporary adjustment and believes economic aid packages will ease tensions. But in Alberta, such measures are seen as short-term painkillers. Unemployment remains high, energy projects remain blocked, and businesses keep shutting down. The conversation is shifting from frustration to action. Alberta could withhold part of its federal tax contributions to reinvest locally. The west-to-east energy supply chain could slow down, hitting the national economy. Other western provinces, particularly Saskatchewan, could join in, forming the largest autonomy movement in Canadian history. Alberta is sending a direct message to the heart of the Federation. Either Ottawa changes course or the West will chart its own. When an economy is weakened by foreign policy missteps with the US and choked by stalled energy infrastructure, rising unemployment is more than just a number. It's a sign of a society running out of patience. If the federal government continues to ignore it, soft separation will no longer be a theory. And when that happens, the crack between Alberta and Canada could become an unbridgeable chasm.
Do you think Mr. Carney understands Quebec?
I think he does not give a damn.
Canada's strong. We can give ourselves far more than anyone can take away. We're building this great country. I just met with the Premier.
Canada is facing the most serious federal crisis in decades, with Quebec now openly declaring it is exploring a sovereignty referendum, and Alberta charging ahead with plans for a 2026 separation vote. The very foundation of the nation is cracking.
Albertans could vote on leaving Canada as soon as 2026. That is the update from Premier Danielle Smith after she met with Prime Minister Mark Carney and after hundreds rallied for Alberta independence.
This is no longer about scattered voices of discontent. It is structured, organized, and planned. While Ottawa remains paralyzed in vague promises and recycled slogans, two of Canada's most powerful provinces are quietly drafting their exits. Premier François Legault has dropped all pretense. He publicly declared that Quebec is now actively considering holding a new referendum on sovereignty. This isn't just political posturing, it's a parting speech dressed as a press conference. Years of feeling sidelined culturally, linguistically, and economically have boiled over into a concrete path towards separation. Quebec asked Ottawa to reduce the number of temporary immigrants by 50%. The federal government never responded.
Of course,
we would like to have a part of that.
Legault wants Canada to renegotiate the free trade agreement with the United States. Opposition parties are calling on the Premier to protect Quebec's interests.
Tensions flared when Prime Minister Mark Carney hinted he may support a Supreme Court challenge against Bill 96, Quebec's law protecting the French language. Legault slammed him publicly, declaring that Carney doesn't care about Quebec. Quebec sees this as an attack on its core identity, and it's fighting back. Premier Danielle Smith has already prepared the legal groundwork for Alberta's separation. The threshold for a referendum petition has been drastically lowered to 177,000 signatures. The vote is planned for 2026.
None of us knows what the future holds should Ottawa, for whatever reason, continue to attack our province, as they have done over the last decade.
Alberta passed the Sovereignty Act, along with the DIY guide for breaking up with Canada, timelines, legislation, procedural frameworks. In Alberta, 65% of UCP voters now support independence. In Quebec, sovereignty support has surged from below 30% to nearly 40% in just weeks. On social media, discussions about joining the U.S. as the 51st or 52nd state are growing. Even if half-joking, it shows a profound collapse in faith in Ottawa. Mark Carney is being criticized for barely mentioning Quebec's key industries, aerospace, forestry, and fisheries. After Quebec helped the Liberal Party gain seats in 2021, it now feels completely ignored. Carney's reaction? Ambiguous statements and soft gestures, described by critics as a sleep-deprived intern drafting farewell speeches at midnight. No commitment, no firm response, just delay. When two of your largest provinces begin drafting divorce papers while the federal government clings to old slogans and vague hopes, the dream of a unified Canada is quickly slipping away. Quebec and Alberta are no longer mere rebels. They are now organized political machines with real public support and structured exit plans. If Ottawa doesn't wake up, if it doesn't take real, concrete action instead of reciting hollow lines, then Canada may soon be nothing more than the lonely name of a capital city, isolated on a map that is quietly being redrawn.
U.S. President Donald Trump's trade deadline is just 3 days away. And while in Washington last week, Canada's negotiating team downplayed the likelihood of a deal by Friday. Today, though, Trump's Commerce Secretary says that deadline will not be delayed any further.
We're standing up for Canada, Canadian interests. Of course, the United States is looking out, the President's looking out for the interests of American workers. There is a landing zone that's possible, but we have to get there.
While the world watches as the United States signs major trade deals with Japan and the European Union, Canadians are left staring at a deafening silence from their own government. Ottawa has failed to secure a comparable agreement with its closest ally, while others race ahead. The cold shoulder from Washington has stung Canadians deeply, and in the western provinces, it sparked something more dangerous, a sense of abandonment. Across Alberta and Saskatchewan, people are asking a chilling question. Has Ottawa stopped representing us altogether? Premier Danielle Smith of Alberta no longer hides her anger. We contribute tens of billions to Canada's economy every year, but when it comes to negotiating with the U.S., Ottawa hesitates. Japan and the EU got 15% tariffs on cars, and we're still waiting for a framework.
Well, look, I mean, tariffs are their own punishment. If you're mad at the other guy, you don't punch yourself in the face. That's what I look at tariffs.
Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe was even more blunt. If one day Americans ask, who's our real partner, Alberta or Ottawa, I think the answer is already obvious. Japan and the EU both secured import tariffs on automobiles reduced to just 15%. Meanwhile, Canada, a neighbor and historic ally, remains in limbo. President Trump flatly stated, "We haven't had much luck with Canada. Maybe it's better to just impose a tariff."
They're going to pay a tariff. I'm going to keep it minimal. I'm going to keep it, I'm not looking to hurt countries. I could do that too, but I'm not looking to do that.
That single comment sent shockwaves through Canada's auto industry. While others were securing access, Canada was stuck defending its existence at the table. This growing dissatisfaction has poured fuel onto the fire of separatist movements. Alberta recently passed legislation to lower the threshold for triggering referendums, allowing only 177,000 signatures instead of over 600,000. Though the provincial government hasn't officially endorsed secession, groups like the Alberta Prosperity Project claim to have already gathered over 250,000 signatures. In Saskatchewan, public unrest is building. While the Premier has not committed to a referendum, pressure from citizens is mounting by the day. If Ottawa won't listen, one organizer said, we'll force the conversation.
Will happen whether the majority want it or not.
It's all right to vote.
Alberta and Saskatchewan send most of their exports not to Ontario or Quebec, but to U.S. states like Montana, Idaho, and Texas. Many farmers in Saskatchewan have been blunt. I sell to Americans. I don't see Ottawa buying anything from me. Ottawa's inability to secure new trade terms only reinforces the reality on the ground. These provinces are already economically tied to the U.S. Whether Ottawa acts or not, the West is drifting, and not quietly.
So Alberta historically has the highest levels of real GDP growth, highest levels of real GDP per person.
Analysts now warn that without a major shift in Ottawa's posture toward trade and provincial autonomy, the separation movements could become unstoppable. When citizens believe they've been betrayed, they'll choose their own path, one expert noted. A full separation of Alberta and Saskatchewan would cost the federal government at least $20 billion annually, and that's just the start. Such a move could send ripple effects across Manitoba, British Columbia, and the Northern Territories. Canada was once hailed as a nation of unity and quiet strength, but today its western provinces look southward, no longer east. Premiers voice frustration not behind closed doors, but in front of cameras. The public no longer whispers their doubts, they organize. What was once a federation of equal partners now feels like a federal shell centered on Ottawa. One day soon, Canadians may wake up and realize the country they knew is gone, and all that remains is a lonely capital surrounded by provinces that no longer call it home.
I have no problem, but I don't trust President Trump as far as I can throw him. He constantly changes his mind. You just don't know who you're dealing with.
Well, Alberta separation continues to be a hot issue in the province and seems destined for a citizen-led referendum.
While the United States finalizes new trade deals with Japan and the European Union, cutting tariffs and expanding strategic cooperation, only one name is left out in the cold. Canada, no tariff relief, no breakthrough agreement, no voice at the table. For provinces like Alberta and Saskatchewan, the silence from Washington isn't nearly as painful as the indifference coming from their own capital, Ottawa. In their eyes, Canada is now nothing more than a name, hollow and disconnected. And if nothing changes, they may be the first to walk away from the federation they once helped build. Alberta and Saskatchewan have had enough. As the economic workhorses of Canada, especially in oil and gas, they've been treated like Ottawa's ATM, constantly contributing but rarely consulted.
We will only sign a deal that's the right deal, that's a good deal for Canada. We're representing Canada, we're standing up for Canada. The United States and Canada can do many good things together.
When the U.S. offered the EU and Japan tariff deals as low as 15%, Canadian exports still faced a looming 35% rate, especially on critical goods like automobiles, steel, and softwood lumber. For Alberta, which accounts for over 70% of Canada's oil production, it's not just unfair, it's strangling. And what's worse, Ottawa is silent. Alberta recently passed the Sovereignty Act, granting the province power to ignore federal laws deemed harmful. Another bill lowered the threshold for triggering a referendum from 640,000 signatures to just 177,000.
I take that seriously, and I hope that the federal government takes that seriously.
Smith believes separatist sentiments were created by Ottawa. She argues it's up to the federal government to fix it, pitching proposals like coast-to-coast oil and gas shipping access.
While the government hasn't officially announced a vote, the Alberta Prosperity Project claims to have collected over 250,000 signatures. Verified or not, the message is crystal clear. If Ottawa won't listen, Alberta will speak for itself. Meanwhile, Saskatchewan hasn't gone as far, but the winds of change are stirring. Talk of greater autonomy is getting louder. Western businesses are growing impatient. More companies in energy, logistics, and construction are relocating to U.S. border states like Montana and North Dakota. A CEO in Calgary put it bluntly, "We're already operating like we're part of the U.S. economy. Ottawa just makes things harder."
Industry, businesses, Canadians, they are anxious and they are concerned. They don't deserve the uncertainty that's been thrust upon them.
The reality? Without any formal declaration, Alberta and Saskatchewan are already behaving like sovereign economies. They're not waiting for Ottawa's permission, they're finding ways to survive. Canada won't break apart in a civil war. It'll erode quietly, from indifference and distrust. When one side pleads for action and the other offers empty debates and delayed negotiations, collapse becomes inevitable. Worse still, the trade deals Ottawa once hoped to secure are slipping away. The US is finalizing preferential terms with major economies, while Canada, its closest neighbor, is being labeled difficult, non-priority, and even not worth negotiating with. One day, the name Canada may still exist on a map, but its heart, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and the western soul that drove its prosperity, may no longer beat in unison. There will be no explosions, no sudden border lines. The loudest sound will be the quiet slam of doors from people who once called Ottawa their nation's center. And by the time the federal government realizes what's been lost, it may be too late. Because sometimes a province doesn't leave simply out of rebellion, but because no one ever fought hard enough to make them stay.